In the heart of a forgotten town in rural America, nestled between decaying barns and overgrown fields, lay Hollow Creek, a place where whispers lingered in the air and shadows danced with a life of their own. The townsfolk rarely spoke of it, but legends flowed like the river that wound through the hollow, rich with tales of restless spirits. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the landscape, a young journalist named Claire arrived to investigate the lore. She had heard stories of a woman named Mary Delaney, who had vanished over a century ago, leaving only a shattered family and unanswered questions. Determined to unearth the truth, Claire checked into the old inn that sat on the outskirts, its peeling paint and creaking floorboards setting a perfect scene for her exploration. That night, as she pored over old newspaper clippings in her dimly lit room, she felt a sudden chill. A draft swept through the room, ruffling the pages, and she glanced up, feeling eyes upon her. In the corner stood an antique mirror, its glass clouded with age. Claire leaned closer, brushing away the dust, and in the dim reflection, she saw not just herself but a flicker of movement, a pale figure dressed in tattered white, her eyes deep wells of sorrow. Startled, Claire stumbled back, but curiosity burned bright. Armed with her flashlight, she ventured out into the cool night, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet echoing in the stillness. She followed the whispers that seemed to call her name, leading her toward Hollow Creek itself, where the water flowed dark and heavy like secrets long buried. At the creek, the air turned electric, and the world around her shimmered. Claire felt an overwhelming sense of dread mixed with exhilaration. Suddenly, the figure of Mary Delaney appeared before her, ethereal and glowing, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. "Help me find my children," she whispered, her voice like rustling leaves. "They're lost in the shadows." Claire's heart raced. "What happened to you?" she stammered. Mary's form flickered as if caught between realms. "Betrayed by those I loved," she said. "I cannot rest until I find them." As she spoke, the landscape shifted, and Claire was transported back in time to a vibrant autumn day. She witnessed Mary laughing with her children, the warmth of sunlight bathing them in a golden glow. But the scene turned dark as a storm rolled in, and shadows gathered around, sinister and watchful. Suddenly, Claire was jolted back to the present. Gasping, the water at Hollow Creek churned violently, and ghostly figures of children emerged, their faces twisted in anguish. They reached out to her, their voices a haunting chorus of sorrow. "Help us! We're lost!" Fear clawed at Claire's insides, but she couldn't turn away. "What do you need?" she called out, her voice trembling. The figures vanished, leaving behind a single wooden locket, its chain glinting in the moonlight. Inside, Claire found a picture of Mary's children, two smiling faces now etched with longing. Determined to uncover the truth, Claire returned to the inn, desperate for answers. The next day, she scoured the town's archives and learned of a tragic fire that had consumed Mary's home the night of her disappearance. Her husband had been found wandering the fields, maddened and broken, muttering about shadows that stole away his children. But the children were never found, and the townsfolk spoke in hushed tones of a curse, believing that Mary's spirit lingered, bound by her grief. That night, Claire returned to the creek, clutching the locket. The air was thick with anticipation, and as she called out for Mary, the wind howled in response. "I know where they are," she shouted, her voice echoing against the stillness. "Let me help you find them." The water began to swirl, forming a dark vortex, and Mary's apparition appeared once more. With a mix of hope and desperation, Claire dropped the locket into the creek. The water glimmered, and suddenly, the shadows materialized Mary's children, their faces now serene, stepping into the light. "Thank you," Mary whispered, tears of joy mingling with sorrow. "You've freed us." As the spirits embraced, a wave of warmth washed over Claire. But as the last flicker of light faded, the creek fell silent. Claire stood alone, the weight of her task settling on her shoulders. The air was still, but she felt a sense of peace, as if the hollow had finally exhaled. Days later, as she packed to leave, Claire noticed something on her desk, a small, worn locket. She opened it, only to find it empty. Her heart raced. Was this a reminder or a warning? As she stepped out into the crisp morning air, she glanced back at the inn. The mirror in her room caught her eye one last time, reflecting a solitary figure, a bittersweet smile on her lips. Claire's heart raced as she stood at the threshold of the inn, the empty locket still heavy in her pocket. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows that stretched across the dusty road. As she turned to leave, a faint breeze rustled the leaves behind her, almost like a whispering farewell, but it felt more like a beckoning. Drawn by an unshakable urge, Claire decided to explore the nearby woods, where locals spoke of eerie occurrences. The trees stood tall and ancient, their gnarled roots twisting like skeletal fingers. She pushed deeper into the thicket, each step resonating with the whispers of the past. The atmosphere shifted, the sunlight dimming as she ventured further. She stumbled upon a clearing where the remnants of a long-abandoned house lay crumbling, half buried in ivy and moss. It was the Delaney home, charred and broken, a skeletal reminder of the family's tragic fate. As Claire approached, she noticed strange markings etched into the scorched wood symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. They resembled a crude version of the locket she had found, and a chill ran down her spine. A sense of urgency surged within her. If the spirits had returned to the creek, perhaps there was still more to uncover here. Suddenly, the wind howled, and the temperature dropped. Claire felt a presence nearby, and she turned, expecting to see the flickering form of Mary. Instead, she was met by a figure cloaked in shadows, its features obscured but eyes burning with an unnatural light. "Who dares disturb my rest?" it intoned, voice echoing like thunder. "I'm Claire," she stammered, heart pounding. "I'm here to help the Delaneys." The shadow shifted, revealing a face, one that looked eerily familiar. It was Mary's husband, his visage twisted with rage and despair. "You should not have meddled," he warned, voice low and menacing. "The shadows are not easily dismissed." Claire took a step back, confusion washing over her. "But I freed Mary's children. They're at peace now." "Peace?" He laughed bitterly, the sound chilling her to the bone. "They were not the only ones lost. The shadows still cling to me, and now you too shall know their embrace." Before Claire could react, the ground beneath her trembled, and dark tendrils snaked up from the earth, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her closer to the rotting remains of the house. Panic surged through her. She remembered the locket and its connection to the family. There had to be a way to break this curse. "Mary!" she shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. "I need you." As if summoned by her plea, the air shimmered, and Mary appeared, her form flickering like candlelight. "You must make a choice, Claire," she whispered urgently. "The shadows are hungry, and they seek to reclaim what was lost. You can either join us or find a way to banish them." Claire's mind raced. The locket, the symbols, could they be a key? "What do I need to do?" she urged, fighting against the grip of the shadows. "The locket must be returned to the heart of the house, where our family was torn apart. It will either sever the ties of the shadows or bind you to them forever." With renewed determination, Claire reached for the locket in her pocket, its weight grounding her resolve. "Stay back!" she shouted at the shadowy figure, using all her strength to break free from its grasp. The dark tendrils recoiled, hissing like serpents. With Mary's guiding presence beside her, Claire sprinted toward the charred remnants of the home, the markings pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She could feel the shadows closing in, their whispers rising to a crescendo, a symphony of torment and despair. As she reached the center of the ruins, she found a small, unburned patch of earthy heart where the house once stood. She dropped to her knees, clutching the locket tightly. "I release you," she cried, placing it in the soil. The moment it touched the ground, a blinding light erupted, illuminating the clearing. The shadows writhed, their forms twisting and contorting in agony. Claire shielded her eyes as the light enveloped her, and for a fleeting moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of love and warmth, the essence of the Delaney family flooding back. But just as quickly, the light began to dim, and Claire could sense the presence of something darker lurking at the edge of the clearing, feeding off the chaos. A low growl reverberated through the air, and the shadows coalesced, forming a monstrous shape that towered above her, its eyes glinting with malice. "Foolish girl," it rasped, its voice like gravel. "You cannot break the bond that has been forged in blood and grief." Claire's heart pounded as she realized the battle was far from over. With her voice trembling, she called out again, "Mary, I need your strength." The wind picked up, swirling around her like a protective barrier. Mary's spirit surged forth, luminous and fierce. "Together, we will face this darkness," she declared, her voice resonating with power. In that moment, Claire felt the weight of the past pressing down on her, but also the hope of redemption. She summoned her courage and stood firm against the encroaching shadows. The battle between light and dark had only just begun, and Claire knew she had to confront the darkness, not just for Mary and her children, but for her own soul as well. With determination coursing through her veins, Claire prepared for the fight of her life, aware that the shadows had awakened, and they would not relinquish their hold easily. The whispers of the hollow echoed in her mind, promising both terror and liberation. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The shadows writhed and coiled around Claire, their forms twisting with malice as the monstrous figure loomed larger. Claire's heart raced, but the presence of Mary beside her was like a lighthouse in a storm. The wind howled, filling her lungs with energy and resolve. "Face your fears," Mary urged, her voice strong and unwavering. "They thrive on despair." Claire took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. "I refuse to be a vessel for your pain," she shouted at the shadowy figure. "You will not claim me or the Delaneys any longer." As the words left her lips, the air crackled with energy. She felt the locket pulsating in the earth beneath her, resonating with her determination. The shadows lunged, tendrils stretching toward her, but she summoned the memories of the Delaney family, their laughter, their love, the joy of their days before the darkness claimed them. "Together!" she cried, and she reached for Mary's spirit. Light radiated from her outstretched hand, illuminating the clearing with a brilliant glow. The shadows hissed, retreating from the light, but the monstrous form grew more agitated, its eyes narrowing into slits of fury. With a fierce roar, it lunged at Claire, but she stood her ground. "You are nothing but remnants of pain," she yelled, her voice steady. "You have no power here." At that moment, the locket shone bright, sending beams of light shooting into the air. The ground trembled as the light expanded, wrapping around the monstrous figure, binding it in chains of luminescence. The shadows screamed, their anguished wails filling the air, a cacophony of sorrow and rage. But the creature wasn't finished. It clawed at the light, trying to break free, its shadowy form distorting and shifting as it attempted to break through. "You cannot destroy me," it bellowed, its voice reverberating through the trees. "I am the darkness that dwells within." Claire felt the weight of those words. The darkness was not just an entity. It was fear, loss, and grief. It lived in every heart that had suffered. But she had come to understand that the light could not banish the darkness. It could only coexist with it. "Then let's confront it," she shouted, her voice echoing through the clearing. "I accept you. I won't let you control me any longer." As she spoke those words, a shift occurred. The shadows around her began to morph, their edges blurring and softening. Claire focused on the pain she had felt in her own life, the moments of despair and loss, and instead of pushing them away, she embraced them. The light around her shimmered with understanding and compassion. The monstrous figure paused, confusion flickering in its glinting eyes. It began to dissolve, its dark form swirling like smoke caught in the wind. Claire could feel the tension in the air loosening as the shadows peeled away from the light, revealing a mosaic of lost souls: Mary, her children, and others who had suffered in the hollow. "Forgive us," they whispered in unison, their voices mingling with the breeze. "We were lost in our grief." Claire reached out, her heart aching for them. You are not alone anymore. We can heal together. With a final surge of energy, the light enveloped the gathering souls. The shadows writhed, but instead of terror, they began to transform, shifting into softer shapes. The faces of the lost emerged, filled with warmth and gratitude. Mary stepped forward, her form radiant. You have freed us, Claire. Thank you for giving us a chance to heal. We will always be part of this land, but now we can rest. As the last of the shadows faded, the clearing was filled with a gentle glow, the air now sweet with the scent of autumn leaves and blooming wildflowers. Claire knelt in the soil, tears streaming down her face. She had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, not just for the Delaneys, but for herself. But as she turned to leave, a familiar whisper brushed against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. The hollow is still alive, Claire. You must remember, there are more stories waiting to be told. Suddenly, the ground beneath her began to tremble again, the remnants of the old house shifting as if alive. Claire stood, heart racing once more, realizing that while she had freed the Delaneys, the hollow held many more secrets, echoes of those who had once lived and loved. The shadows may have been banished for now, but the land itself was a tapestry of stories, woven with threads of joy and sorrow. As she stepped back from the clearing, Claire felt a pull, a calling deeper than before. There were still whispers in the air, beckoning her to uncover more. With the dawn of a new day breaking on the horizon, she understood her journey was far from over. The hollow held the promise of countless souls waiting for a voice, and Claire knew she would be the one to tell their stories. As she walked away, the locket glimmered softly in the morning light, a reminder of the bond she now shared with the hollow. Claire took a deep breath, the air tinged with possibility, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she was no longer alone in her quest. The true adventure had only just begun. With the dawn's first light spilling over the horizon, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. She turned back to the clearing, where the remnants of the Delaney home had begun to shift and shimmer in the soft glow. The warmth of the sunlight filled her heart, and she knew that the spirits of the hollow had found their peace, but many more stories remained to be uncovered. As she made her way back through the woods, the whispers of the land called to her, guiding her steps. Each rustle of leaves and creak of branches felt like an invitation to explore the rich tapestry of history woven into the fabric of the hollow. Days turned into weeks as Claire immersed herself in research, combing through local archives and interviewing the townsfolk. She learned of other families who had faced tragedies, lost children, broken homes, and betrayals that had etched deep scars in the land. Each tale was a thread leading back to the heart of the hollow, revealing how the past clung to the present, shaping the lives of those who remained. One evening, as she sat in her room at the inn, a sense of urgency gripped her. The locket she had placed in the ground had begun to pulse softly, its glow barely perceptible but undeniable. It seemed to beckon her to return to the clearing. That night, she followed the faint trail of light guiding her way through the darkened woods. As she reached the clearing, she gasped. The air shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and the forms of the Delaney family stood once more before her, their expressions serene and welcoming. "Claire," Mary said, her voice resonating with warmth, "your courage has opened doors, and now we can help you uncover the lost stories." The clearing transformed, revealing visions of the past, joyous gatherings, heart-wrenching goodbyes, and moments of deep sorrow that had shaped the hollow. Claire felt an overwhelming connection to the land and its spirits, understanding that each soul she encountered would guide her in revealing the truth. "Each time you uncover a story, we gain strength," Mary continued. "But there is one more that must be told, one that binds us all." Claire's heart raced. "What is it?" Mary's form flickered, and the air around them crackled with energy. "The story of the Hollow's keeper, the one who tried to harness the power of the shadows and was consumed by them. You must confront this darkness to truly free the Hollow." As the images coalesced into a singular vision, Claire saw a man once proud and strong, now a shadow of his former self standing at the edge of the woods, desperate and lost. His name was Samuel, a figure long whispered about in local lore, a man whose grief had led him to dark places. The keeper? Claire asked, her breath catching in her throat. Yes, Mary confirmed. He thought he could control the shadows. In his hubris, he became one with them. He still wanders the forest, trapped between worlds. Realizing that Samuel's story was intertwined with the fate of the Hollow, Claire steeled herself. I'll find him. The spirits nodded, their ethereal light guiding her deeper into the woods, where the air grew colder and the trees loomed like silent sentinels. Claire followed the whispers that echoed around her, feeling the weight of countless lost souls urging her forward. Finally, she reached a clearing draped in shadows, where Samuel stood, his form twisted and fragmented, a reflection of the darkness within. He looked up, eyes wide with surprise and anguish. Who dares approach? He rasped, voice like gravel. I'm here to help you, Samuel, Claire said, her voice steady. Your pain has kept you trapped. Let me tell your story. He recoiled, anger flaring in his eyes. You know nothing. I was meant to wield this power. You were meant to heal, Claire countered, stepping closer, her heart filled with compassion. Let me help you find peace. As she spoke, the ground beneath them trembled, and shadows danced menacingly around Samuel. Claire took a deep breath, channeling the strength she had found in her journey and the love of the Delaney family. You're not alone, Samuel. Embrace your story. We can break this cycle together. The shadows writhed, their whispers turning to cries of agony. Samuel hesitated, the conflict playing out on his face. Claire reached for him, her hand outstretched, the light from the locket glowing fiercely at her chest. Remember the joy, the love you had before the shadows claimed you, she urged. Let it guide you back to the light. In that moment, something shifted within him. The anger faded, replaced by sorrow. Samuel's form flickered, and Claire could see the man he once was, the father, the husband, the keeper of a family lost to grief. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at her, recognition breaking through the darkness. I remember, he choked out, the shadows swirling more violently around him. But I don't know how to let go. Let me show you, Claire whispered, her voice steady and filled with conviction. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around him. The shadows shrieked, trying to pull them apart, but the light from the locket surged, enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth. Together, they faced the darkness, allowing the memories of love, joy, and sorrow to wash over them. The shadows shrieked and writhed, but Claire held Samuel tighter, urging him to embrace his pain instead of fighting it. Release it, she murmured. It's time to set yourself free. With a final cry, Samuel surrendered, the darkness unraveling around him. The shadows melted away like smoke, revealing the man he once was, bathed in light. As the last vestiges of despair faded, a profound peace enveloped him. Thank you, Samuel whispered, a soft smile breaking through his tears. I can feel them again, my family. As he turned, the spirits of Mary and her children appeared, embracing him in a radiant glow. The air filled with the sound of laughter and love, a beautiful symphony that echoed through the hollow. Claire stepped back, her heart swelling with joy and relief. She had not only freed Samuel but had woven together the stories of those who had suffered, creating a bridge between the past and present. With the dawn breaking in brilliant hues across the sky, the hollow felt transformed. The whispers had quieted, replaced by a gentle hum of life and hope. Claire looked around, knowing that her journey was far from over, but now it was filled with promise. As she turned to leave the clearing, the locket in her pocket pulsed gently, reminding her that there were still stories to tell. The hollow was alive, its history rich and intertwined with the lives of those who had once walked its paths, and she was ready to be its voice. With each step she took back toward the inn, she felt the land beneath her feet resonating with gratitude, a reminder that every story mattered, every voice deserved to be heard. Claire smiled, knowing that her adventure was just beginning, and the hollow was no longer a place of shadows, but a realm of healing and possibility. Share your opinion about this story in the comments and tell us what story you would like to hear on our channel.